Welcome, all you citizens of the world. I'm Michael James, and it's time for another edition of the Live from the Heartland show. This is for the week of September 21st in the year 2024. And I'm sitting at my kitchen table. I had a little breakfast. I'm back from the barber shop, got my locks shorn off, and I've been getting ready for the show. I've been checking the news, and I'd like to share a good thing, and that would be that Norway is the first country in the world with more electric vehicles than gas-powered cars. And that's according to the vehicle registration data of the Norwegian Road Federation, and it was released this past Tuesday. Another thing that's good that I'd like to share is that Billie Eilish is among a number of people who've come out for Vice President Harris's run for the presidency. And I've heard from many people that Operation Swing State, where people from Illinois are going up to Wisconsin and to Michigan, have been knocking on thousands and thousands of doors. Our co-producer, Katie Hogan, was on last week giving a little report on that, along with Tom Clark. They were talking about the debate, which, according to all the polls now, President-to-be Harris, we hope, did much better than the other guy. I also saw that Congressman Danny Davis and a number of people are heading to Milwaukee to work on turning out voters. So this is going on, and people really want to pay attention. Here in our neighborhood, the weather has been great. We've had warm weather, hardly any rain for a while. It looks that way to continue. That is not necessarily good on a lot of fronts, particularly for some farmers. And if you look around in our neighborhood, the lawns are really dried out. On the other hand, some people are ready to harvest and they don't want rain. So we revel in the contradictions. On my phone earlier this week, it lit up with announcements that in Lebanon, there had been pager explosions of apparently Hezbollah members. Thousands of people were injured, 12 are dead. 2 children. Apparently, these things were booby trapped, so to speak, before they were shipped to Lebanon, and apparently they were in the hands of Hezbollah. And then this past Wednesday, we had an announcement as people were attending a funeral there. More explosions happened on various devices. While I abhor what happened in October when Hamas went into Israel, I think that the Israeli response has been over the top and pretty negative. And I wonder how this is going to play out in the next 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 years. Act after act, Israel has worked to sabotage community life and things in general in Gaza, and it doesn't appear to be stopping. On this most recent blowing up of Hezbollah's pagers, the U.S. did not know about it, supposedly, until after it happened. This is not good, and it is too bad. On another negative front, the past President Trump has been spreading the rumor that Haitian immigrants here legally living in Springfield, Missouri, were eating other people's cats and dogs. This has been disproven over and over. People have come out, Republicans in Springfield, the government in Springfield, Ohio, have all condemned this and pointed out how it's been a negative influence on the community there. I don't know what to tell you. It's just another lie. And if people don't get it, they don't get it. And unfortunately, that could affect us all. All right, on the sports front, the Sox did win 3 in a row before losing. The Cubs are pretty much split in their last 10 games. The Sky versus the Fever is on this past Wednesday, but we don't have that information yet. The Bears apparently need to really shore up their offensive line. Our new quarterback certainly can scramble, but he got sacked a few times and the Bears lost. And if you are a Bulls fan and looking forward to the opening of the season, it's October 8th. That's a Tuesday. They're going to play the Cavaliers in Cleveland. Last week, I had not only Katie Hogan and Tom Clark, co-producers of this show. They talked about the debate and the upcoming election, et cetera. But then I had 2 old friends, Dee Gorton, also known as Doy Gorton, and Jane Addams. They lived in Carbondale. Both were in SDS, Students for Democratic Society. Doy was in the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee. He's from Mississippi, a white kid of privilege, but with principles. And they have a new book coming out, The White South. And they talked about the photographs that he had taken back in 69 and 70, which really was the last year of legal segregation in Mississippi. And they really analyzed the stances of people, the behavior between Black and whites at that time. He went on to become a photographer for the Philadelphia Inquirer, the New York Times, at the White House. These are beautiful photos, and the book is coming out soon called The White South, and it's Fall Line Press. If you go to Fall Line Press or just type in D. Gorton, The White South, you're going to find it, and there are lots and lots of pictures to look at. Plus, the interview is real good if you want to check it out. And that would be at youtube.com/heartlandmedia/video. All right, we're going to take a short musical break. I've got two guests. We're going to have Ebony DeBerry, who is running for the Chicago School Board in the District 2. And we're going to have Flint Taylor of the People's Law Office bringing us up to date on things we should know about. We'll be right back with our first guest in just a moment. Welcome back, you citizens of the world. I'm Michael James, and I'm bringing on our first guest for the Live from the Heartland show for the week of September 21st. And I'm really glad to say that our first guest, Ebony DeBerry, is a Rogers Park neighbor, and she is running for the new Chicago School Board, District 2. And I think it's good that our listeners and viewers get to know her. She is endorsed by a whole host of people, including Network 49, including the 49th Ward Alderperson Maria Haddon, 48th Ward Neighbors for Justice, Northside Democracy for America, and a whole host of other people. So good day to you, Ebony.
Good day, Michael. Thank you so much for having me on such a wonderful historic show. And I'm so proud to be here representing Rogers Park, 11 Rogers Park.
Right on. And I did have one of your canvassers come to my door the other day, and I said, I'm already in. I'm rooting for her. So give us a little bit of our listeners and our viewers an overview of what the elected school board is all about, how it came to be, and what are...
For more than 20 years, Chicago was the only school board that was not elected. We were fully appointed by the mayor. We never knew who those folks were. We never knew what qualified them to make decisions for our public school system. And for more than 20 years, organizers have been fighting for the right to have an elected school board. It's been a very popular decision for decades, and still it was a huge fight. And I think over the last 5 years, we've gained so much momentum in electing progressive elected officials that it's finally come to be. And we want some of the folks who helped organize to make it happen on the board. You know, we want people who represent our values, people who have a history for speaking truth to power, for demanding what's just, elected. And so I'm so proud to be on the slate with many activists and organizers endorsed by our schools, which is a huge coalition of grassroots supporters.
So how is this set up? Your District 2, how many elected board members will there be, and how many, is it all going to be elected, or is it some of them going to be appointed by the mayor, or how's it going to work?
This election cycle, half of us will be elected. So 10 of us will be elected. Another 10 will be appointed. And it depends. Every district is split up. So we live in 2A as Rogers Parkers, and 2B would be south of us. So Albany Park and some of the other neighborhoods south of us, they would be 2B. When I win in 2A, the mayor will appoint someone in 2B.
Uh-huh.
That's how it works.
So there are going to be 10 elected members and 10 appointed by the mayor. And at some point, that's going to change where they're all going to be elected?
2 years. 2 years from now, everyone will have to run their own race and everyone will be elected.
Do you think that's good that the mayor is appointing 10 of them now, or is that something that was a compromise?
I think it's good for the first time, mostly because we've never done this before. There's been a lot of building it while driving it, while flying it right now. We're trying to figure out how much this election costs, how many people we need to get a win number. There were so many unknowns that I think we would have had a lot of the same kind of folks we always had before, those with the privilege and the money and the wheel for power running. And those are not necessarily the people we want representing us.
Ebony DeBerry, tell me what the school board does. What will the school board do? Yeah, I assume it's to run the whole CPS programs, Chicago Public Schools, but give me a little overview of what they do.
So the Board of Education has a lot of power. They decide how we spend our money and with whom. They decide a lot of policies that Chicago Public Schools have to enact. And also, they are responsible for keeping Chicago Public Schools accountable for what they say they're going to do. So it's a lot of responsibility. It's a huge budget, $9 billion. Ooh. And there's a lot of interest in private money going into these races, because in the past there were all kinds of backdoor deals, and there's lots of ways to have power plays as a board member. And so we really have to watch this election very closely and be privy to who's supporting whose campaigns.
Let me go a little bit further on that, because, we had, as the head of the whole school system, we had Arnie Duncan for a while, who's a good guy in a lot of ways, but he was for charter schools. And in Network 49 up here and in our ward, we were pretty critical of charter schools and that it took money away from the public sector. And we actually passed some things in the 49th ward that said no more charter schools. And I'm wondering if the concern about the mayors of this mayor probably is not going to appoint pro-charter school people, but that could be an issue, I would imagine. If the school board leaned to the right, they could put money into charter schools. Is that a true thing?
Absolutely, and we should be very wary about it. The moratorium on charter schools is going to be up soon. So that means that a lot of people interested in making money off of public education are interested in running and financing this race. We in Rogers Park, we respect public education. We fight for public education in neighborhood schools. And we know that no one should be profiting off of public education. It's a very scary idea. We know that New Orleans lost their public school system. A lot of Philadelphia lost their public school system because of privatizers. It's not okay with us. Because
everyone should remember that the person who helped lose the public schools in New Orleans was Vallis. And I'm glad we don't have him as our mayor, but he could attempt a comeback. And that's a whole other issue about how Mayor Johnson is doing. It's time to ask you a little bit about yourself. First of all, why are you running? What made you decide to do this? You're a longtime organizer. You've done a lot of community work. You work with educational initiatives for One North Side. You oversee the Parent Mentor Program. You're a longtime community activist. You graduated from the Chicago Public Schools. You are the parent of a recent graduate, et cetera, et cetera. Why do you want to be on the school board?
All those reasons, Michael. I am so proud to be from Rogers Park. I'm so proud to be a graduate of Chicago Public Schools and be a parent. I used to be a teacher in the system. Now I run a mentor program where parents volunteer in classrooms. And so I want to be accountable to my community. I want to represent our community. The District 2, we have very unique issues in terms of language access, in terms of busing issues, in terms of SPED requirements. And so I want to represent those folks that I get to interact with on a daily basis because of my job and because of the way I like to volunteer and interact with my community. So I'm running because I didn't hear anyone's name that I trusted was running. I'm running because people that I love asked me to run. I'm running because I'm a mentor to a lot of other women of color, and I want them to know it's possible.
That's good. Those are good reasons. So let me ask you, I'm going to throw you a little ringer here. What do you like to do for fun?
Oh, Michael, I love to thrift. I love to read.
Like the kids.
I love to travel. So those are my big three. I love those things the most. And I haven't been able to do any of them in this election cycle. So I'm very looking forward to November.
Yeah, after November, I think all of us think we're going to travel around. So, what are your hopes for the new elected school board? I mean, what will you bring to that, and what might other progressives bring to that if they are either appointed by the mayor or elected by the community?
My biggest hope, Michael, is that we get a coalition of folks that are willing to work together, that share a lot of the same values, that are willing to fight for more funding. A lot of what we want to do is going to cost a lot more money. It's going to require a lot more positions to be filled in our public school system. And so my biggest dream is that we're on one accord, that we all desire fully funded schools with librarians, nurses, art teachers, counselors, social workers, smaller classrooms, everything that I had.
Track and field, a real track rather than running in the hallways.
Thank you, Michael. Yes. Real sports teams, diverse teachers to go along with a diverse student body.
Well, all those things are really good. And let me ask you about the other people running. Are there any other districts where you are in simpatico with other people running? I mean, I imagine there are some communities, some of these districts that are going to have not as progressive types running. What do you see out there among your fellow candidates?
I see everything. I see everything you can imagine, Michael. Paul Vallis has a PAC. He's already supporting some of the people in this race. We need to be wary of that. Also, G2 Brown, who's been fighting for a just school system for 30 years, he's already going to be on the school board. All his competition has dropped out. So there is the whole gamut. I'm just hoping that we get enough people we can work with to move things for our children, There are pros and cons about having so many people on the Board of Education, right? We want to be representative, but also we need to reach consensus.
Well, that's a key thing, and it's good luck to that. So how would you suggest people who are interested in your campaign can find out more about it or could help? I know you have volunteers out there in the community working. Give us a little bit of info about how people get involved and what they might expect to be doing.
Yes, thank you, Michael. Please look for me at Ebony, EBONY, 4, education. I'm on all the socials. Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. Also, that's the same name for my website. I need canvassers, people who are willing to knock on doors or people who are willing to phone bank and call voters and let them know about me. The thing about the elected school race is none of us have much name recognition. So getting my name out there is super important. Also, people who are willing to have house parties, have neighbors over to introduce me to. Fundraising is huge. There's more money in my race than any other race in the city, and it's not my money. I have the people power. I don't have the money power. So please get involved in any one of those ways. It would be super helpful.
Ebony DeBerry, how many people are running against you in District 2?
There are 3 others.
And how many? Only one gets picked?
One gets elected. And the mayor can appoint anybody he wants, not necessarily any of us.
Uh-huh. And are there any other avowed progressives running, or does everyone say they're progressive now?
Everyone says it. So I would check the history, right? What do the young people say? Check the receipts, people. Where have they been? I've not seen them in community meetings.
Well, the education of our youth is one of the most important things that can happen. And I'm proud to say that I'm the dad of a lot of kids who came out of Chicago public schools, and they've all gone on to do good work in the world. And we definitely have had a challenge in the recent years around the privatization of our public education system. It continues throughout the country, really. It's not just a problem here. I know that there are some good charter schools around the country that do good work, but there's a lot that are just about making money. So, Ebony DeBerry, you got 1 more minute. Give me a wrap about what do you think ought to happen and how much better the schools could be?
I have so much hope for our public school system. I get to be in 8 schools right now that are doing incredible things. We can leverage our universities. We can leverage our community centers. We can leverage employment centers and lift up our children and their parents at the same time. We really have to worry about maintaining our neighbors. So we have to make sure that our neighbors' jobs have better jobs or access to better jobs. We can work with the city colleges. So sustainable school model is what I'm really harrowing. It brings up children and parents at the same time with partners.
So this big election is taking place November 5th. There's a lot of other stuff at the top of the ballot that we hope people will be paying attention to. I think that the elected school board is down at the bottom, but don't hesitate, all you people. And what is the big date? It's Tuesday, November 5th?
Absolutely. Tuesday the 5th.
Well, it's really good to have you on, Ebony. I'm sure we'll be talking to you again, and I'm rooting for you.
Thank you so much, Michael. I appreciate you. And I hope to talk to you sooner, closer to Election Day.
Right on. And everybody else, stay here on the left end of your dial or however you're getting live from the Heartland. And we'll be back with one of the people's lawyers here in Chicago, the one and only Flint Taylor, the author of The Torture Machine, a lawyer on all the Fred Hampton cases, et cetera, et cetera. He's going to catch us up to date on some things going on. Have a short musical break. We'll be right back. Stay tuned. Okay, all you citizens of the world, welcome back to Live from the Heartland for the week of September 21st. And recently I had the pleasure of going to a party in the backyard of our next guest, the one and only Flint Taylor, the author of the great book, The Torture Machine, Racism and Police Violence in Chicago, is someone who I always like to get on the show to fill me in on what's really going on. And recently I heard on the radio some real talk about wrongful conviction cases here in Chicago and Illinois. Flint, can you give us a little insight into what kind of wrongful conviction cases we're talking about?
Well, we're talking about a gamut of cases, but the focus or a focus is wrongful convictions based on coerced confessions. And of course, when you talk about that, you have to bring up the name of John Burge, and you have to bring up the police torture cases that happened in this city for over 20 years back in the 70s, 80s, and early 90s. So many of these wrongful conviction cases are men and a few women as well who were tortured by Burge and ended up spending decades first in some on death row, and then later commuted to life sentences, long sentences. But many of them have become exonerated by the courts and or pardoned by the governor. And when that happens, they can bring lawsuits. So what's happened is these folks that have been exonerated after spending decades in the penitentiary, a good portion of them based on tortured confessions by Burge, they are able to bring lawsuits. And these lawsuits have historically been defended by pinstripe lawyers. Pinstripe patronage is what Gene Pitcham used to call them. They're lawyers, private lawyers that are hired by the city to do the city's dirty work, and they're paid hourly rates and they're predominantly white. They're predominantly former prosecutors, and they're predominantly from firms that are in the game to bill as much as they can to fight these cases, even though there's no real basis in law or in fact to fight them. So those are the cases, and what you've heard in the media is a lot of those cases have come home to roost. And what I mean by that is the exonerated men and women have brought these lawsuits, and the city with these lawyers continue to fight them. And sometimes in the case that just made publicity, because it was a $50 million verdict to a young man who was, it's not a Burge case, but it was a false confession case, and he was interrogated on video. And despite it being on video, the jury was so outraged that it gave this young man $50 million for 10 years in the penitentiary. And what we learned was that these lawyers that I'm talking about would not offer beyond $3 million in a settlement. I don't know, but I assume that the lawyers for this man probably would have settled for somewhere in the area of 10 million, which would have been $1 million per year, which is what a lot of juries give, and some settlements end up as. But the city wouldn't give over 3. So what the city ended up was a $47 million bath from what the number they offered, a $40 million bath from what the lawyers probably would have taken, plus paying these pinstripe lawyers another $3-4 million to try the case. So this is what the city of Chicago and its law department is dealing with right now. And they haven't been dealing with it in any way different than the mayors, starting with Richie Daley and then Rahm and Lori Lightfoot, have dealt with it.
Is there a grand total of what the city is out over the last few years on wrongful conviction and torture cases?
There is, and I know numbers sometimes they can boggle the mind, or they just make your eyes glaze. But then I've been tracking the numbers that have been paid to these lawyers, these pinstripe lawyers, to fight cases, many of which I've been involved in for the plaintiffs, for the Burge torture survivors. And there's also been a tracking of the broader wrongful conviction cases, Burge and others. And so in the last 20 years or 25 years, the Burge cases have cost the city and the county and the state collectively about $260 million. That's $260 million, of which
that would cover a lot of issues around the city.
you bet. And the city has paid the vast majority of that amount of money, around $220 million of that Burge money. When you go more broadly to the wrongful conviction cases and you look at how much money has been paid out, it becomes $750 million. That's $750 million over the last 25 years. And of that, $150 million of that has gone to the pinstripe lawyers. So when Mayor Johnson was elected, and when he was running for mayor, he said, we're going to change this kind of thing. We're going to deal with reparations. We're going to deal with these wrongful conviction cases. We realize that Burge was a serial torturer, and we're not going to defend these cases anymore. But now we've had an 18-month sample of the administration and its corporation counsel. And that is a woman by the name of Mary Richardson Lowry. And her history goes back to Richie Daley's administration. So she has taken over And it's been business as usual. We're seeing these same predominantly white pinstripe lawyers in these cases. They're raising the same kind of frivolous issues. They're fighting these cases. They're not stepping to the plate to settle these cases. And just generally, you have to ask after 18 months, what is different about what Mayor Johnson is doing with regard to torture and wrongful convictions than what the previous mayors have been doing? You have the same approaches, and you have, let me give you a couple of examples, if I might, Michael, of what these lawyers are doing. In one case that's still pending, or two cases that are pending, torture cases, they judge that was assigned to the case is a newly minted African-American judge, a wonderful civil rights lawyer by the name of Jeff Cummings, impeccable reputation. Two of these torture cases were sent to this African-American judge, the first African-American judge, federal judge, to ever sit on torture cases and all the history of all the torture cases. So what does the city do? These white lawyers, with the approval of Mary Richardson Lowry, the Corp Counsel, they try to recuse this judge. And they make arguments about how, as a civil rights lawyer, he signed a report that spoke to the issues of police torture. So they said, well, he's got to be recused. Well, he very thoughtfully denied that request. So Lowry and her gang of pinstripers took it to the Federal Court of Appeals here in Chicago. And it took the Federal Court of Appeals 2 days to throw out that appeal. But that's the kind of money that's being thrown at the defense of Burge cases. And another one I'll give you, and as you know, Michael, and your listeners may as well, the Jackie Wilson case. I am one of the lawyers in Jackie Wilson. Jackie Wilson, along with his brother Andrew, is the seminal case of police torture that exposed the electric shock and all of that in police cases. And Jackie, after 36 years, was finally released. We were able to get him a certificate of innocence, and we went to federal court. And the county stepped up for its role in the case because the prosecutors in the case had been committing perjury and covering up evidence and been involved in the tortured confession and all of that. So they offered, and we accepted $17 million for the county's role. Well, the city has not followed suit for their role, which of course Burge's role was even more significant. And instead, they have been fighting the case, and they've done some remarkable things that even under the prior administration haven't been done. And that is, many of the detectives, including Burge, have taken over the years the Fifth Amendment. Their lawyers have advised them, don't come in and lie and commit perjury because you might end up like Burge did in the federal joint for your perjury. So in this case, in the Jackie Wilson case, despite the fact that the state court judge found that these detectives had tortured Jackie, found it as a judicial finding, these lawyers came in and got one of the main torturers who, along with Burge, who's now dead, had previously taken the Fifth Amendment and had him, what they say, come off the Fifth Amendment and come in and say, oh, I never committed the perjury. So now Mayor Johnson's lawyers are standing behind a Burge detective who is now, we think, and certainly the judge in the state court thought, had committed torture and has come in and under oath said, I didn't torture anybody. That's what's happening behind the Johnson administration and their pinstripe lawyers, and the kind of lengths they're going to deny the torture that Johnson has recognized publicly has happened.
Lynn, let me ask you, has the Corporation Counsel, the pinstripe lawyers, have they had any successes? I mean, it sounds like And then why are they so resistant? I mean, is it built into the corporation council job? I did hear one thing recently that the Mayor Johnson, was better on the right to protest at the Democratic convention than his corporation council wanted him to be, or they were the more conservative force around all that issue. I don't know if that's true or not, but I'm just wondering who are these people and why do they have the power to try and belittle our judicial system after it comes up with what we consider to be pretty just decisions?
Well, you ask about Johnson versus the Corporation Council, and you have to wonder whether they built some kind of wall between Johnson and the lawyers, and that whether Johnson is vetting any of these decisions, because he seems like the type of person that if he goes out and says, these people who have been wrongfully convicted, these people who have been tortured need to be compensated. We need to deal with these cases up front. You would think that the lawyers would follow suit, but the opposite is the case. As I've said, things have not only stayed the same, they've gotten worse in some instances. These lawyers, as I said, many of them are former state's attorneys, former prosecutors who believed in Burge, who believed in getting confessions, no matter how you got them. Some of them were involved in actually presenting these confessions in court in their prior careers as state's attorneys. They, by and large, are of two kinds. As I said, they're predominantly, if not exclusively, white lawyers. They have their own firms, sometimes from big firms. They have a background in law enforcement, and they're either true believers, they line up with the FOP in ideology, in what they believe and how they deny, they're deniers, or they're lawyers who are in it for the money. And the money's good. Some of these lawyers have gone from having a little tiny firm to starting their own firm. Some of these lawyers have made 30, $40 million. Some of these firms the total being 150 million. There's 4 or 5 firms that have made the vast majority of that money. So the money's good. The lawyers are making a lot of money. And they're in the track record in terms of raising these issues. They know how to raise these issues and to avoid admitting that the city had a policy as implemented by Burge of torturing people. And so they do in court. I try to sidestep what their leaders, from Rahm with reparations to Lori when Burge died to Mayor Johnson when he ran for office, said and admitted about torture. And then they go in court and try to avoid those very, very definitive statements by the head of the government. They don't have any success ultimately, Mike.
But they make money. They make money in slowing it down.
They make money, exactly, and they take it all the way to the eve of trial, and then they offer a settlement. So they've made money, and so that money goes to the lawyers rather than to victims of torture or wrongful conviction.
Well, it sounds to me like that maybe the corporation council is separate from. It's like Trump trying to control the Justice Department, where the Justice Department wants to be independent, but it happens to be loaded with bad guys.
Right.
Anyhow, let's switch a little bit and talk about the police in general. You know, Chicago has a long history, not only in the assassination of the beloved Fred Hampton, but we certainly have situation with Laquan McDonald being shot, the Burge torture cases. And there's a whole lot of other things which you know about and many of our listeners know about. And I'm wondering, has there been any improvement in the Chicago police? I mean, we always know there were good cops, not so good cops, some real bad cops. The city has this new Empowering Communities for Public Safety Act, where we have police district councils, which are supposed to, they're charged with building connections between the police and the community, collaborate on the implementation of community policing, et cetera. I'm wondering if that's had any impact yet on the police. Or is it the same old story where the police tend to not only serve and protect, but beat the shit out of people whenever they can.
Well, I think the latter is the case, Michael. Probably the statistics are that they don't shoot and kill as many Black people as they did 50 years ago, but they still do it, and they still do it in outrageous ways. We know about the Dexter Reed case that happened back, I think, in the spring, where tactical unit officers hopped out, the jump out units. They still have those units, and got into a thing with Dexter Reed and put 96 bullets into his car, and ultimately shot him while he was unarmed behind his car, supposedly because he didn't have on a seatbelt, which was obviously just a pretext for them stopping a Black man in a new car in the Black community. And so that's a kind of another case in a long line of cases like you have mentioned, but there are others that go along with that. And it all flows from the same principle, which is the police aren't there to serve and protect. They are there really, if we get right down to the bare bones of it, to suppress in those communities, in the poor and Black and brown communities. That's the way they operate, and they haven't changed in their operations in that sense, whether it be a tactical unit, whether it be stop and frisk, shaking down people. There have been incremental changes. There was a consent decree, and we see each 6 months, well, they're in 3% compliance. I think the latest number is they're in 7% compliance. Now, this consent decree was entered when? Back when Trump was president. It was entered just as Trump became president. So we're talking about 7 or 8 years ago, and they're 7% in compliance. And another misstep, in my point of view, from my viewpoint, when Johnson became mayor, is who he appointed as his superintendent. We saw one of the things that was a huge mistake by Harold Washington was to appoint Leroy Martin as his police superintendent. And of course, Martin was a former boss of Burge, and the rest is history, of course. Now we have Johnson appointing from within Snelling. And what was Snelling? Snelling back in the 90s was involved in one of these tactical units. He had something like 8 or 10 brutality complaints against him back in the 90s. How can you appoint someone like that to be the mayor? I mean, to be the police superintendent. So it's got to start from the top. And I haven't seen anything that's told me that Snelling is taking an aggressive approach to police violence. And so I have to be rather pessimistic. I mean, after George Floyd was murdered, there was a real move in city council and across the country to, if not defund the police, to certainly cut back the monies that went to police and cut back on the kinds of things that they were doing. One of the major problems is mental health issues, and the police kill and maim and beat a lot of people who are suffering from some form of mental health crisis. They shouldn't be involved in that situation, but they are, and that's why we see all of these cases that we see. That case down in Springfield, I don't know if people are aware of the Massey case, how outrageous that was. Well, that woman might not have been acting exactly how the police expected her to act. She might have been having some mental issues, but they just basically shot her in cold blood. And it was so outrageous that the prosecutor down there indicted the cops for murder. And that's almost unheard of, to indict a cop for murder. You might get him for manslaughter. You might get him for, negligent homicide. But anyway, to answer your question, I think that to some degree, more things change, the more they stay the same.
Well, Flint, we're going to run out of time, but we got a few minutes left. And then one of the things I teach people with at the beginning was that one of the reasons we wanted you to come on, because you had told me you have a new book in the works. Your last book, The Torture Machine, is pretty wonderful. And for those people who really want to know the nitty gritty of some history that's gone on in this town, they should check it out. But one of the people who you and I have known a lot about, Ed Hanrahan, he was a state's attorney. He was involved with COINTEL program and Hoover in the FBI. And they assassinated Fred Hampton, who was, I could say he was our leader at that time in a lot of ways. Can you give us a little bit? I think we have 3 or 4 minutes, and about the book, how you're doing on it, when we might expect it, and what's it all about? 3 minutes.
3-minute drill. Well, back when the pandemic happened, and I would go to my office kind of as a lone ranger, so to speak.
Know that feeling.
I started to go down in the basement of our office where our archives with regard to all of the Fred Hampton case that we litigated for so many years are kept. And so my first approach was to digitalize a lot of the transcripts and documents and by scanning them in. So I started to do that, and I started to look at what I was scanning in, the Hanrahan testimony, the Growth testimony, who led the raid, et cetera, et cetera. And it occurred to me that as much as my partner, Jeff Haas, who had written The Assassination of Fred Hampton, had written, and all of the articles I had written about the Hampton case and all the speaking we've done, that we primarily focused, and rightfully so, on the FBI's role in the conspiracy, the COINTELPRO, the O'Neill setting up the raid, all of that. And Hanrahan, who was the state's attorney and who, with his first assistant Jolovec, actually planned the raid with the assistance of the FBI, that it was mentioned, it was written about to some limited degree, but it hadn't been focused on. So I thought it's time that history looks at prosecutors, and particularly Hanrahan and his people's role in the Hampton case, starting at the very beginning of the planning of the raid and going all the way through until he was dethroned several years later. So the book is called Prosecutors, Politicians, Police Violence, A Chicago Story. And it documents not only Hanrahan and the Hampton case, but then it moves into the torture cases, and specifically Jackie Wilson's 40-year history in terms of his case and all the different things the prosecutors did in that case. So it's about prosecutors, it's about Daley and the politicians, and it's again about police violence, focusing on the assassination of Fred Hampton and the torture of the Wilson brothers.
Flint Taylor, People's Lawyer. When might this book be coming out? And I think it's going to be Haymarket, right?
It's Haymarket, as was the first. And, we're getting to the final stages of editing. I'm hoping that it'll come out early next year.
Maybe be a race, you and me and Katie, on who gets the Heartland book or your book. It's great hearing you talk. I just wanted to let people know that Hanrahan was probably the next in line to be the mayor after Mayor Daley until this all happened and we turned it around. Flint, you do great work. I think you'll continue to do that for a while because I know you're out there running, keeping yourself in good shape. I want to thank you, and I want to thank Ebony DeBerry for being our guest on this week, September 21st, Live from the Heartland show. And I want to thank everybody else who makes the show possible, from our engineer, Hal James, to our producers, Katie Hogan, Tom Clark, and Lynn Orman. We hope you all continue to do good in the world. The world needs all the good that we all do together. And together we can bring about a whole lot of power to the people. See you next time.